coronavirus. What is going on? Are we not taking it seriously enough, or is this really a pandemic panic? That's what we're talking about today on Signs Trending. I'm Ken Kingston.
And I'm Daniel Kuberek, and we'd love to have you join the conversation on our Facebook group, which is called Signs Trending. So just chuck that into your Facebook search bar and join the conversation. Any topic we'll be discussing today, you can jump on and share your thoughts there.
Love it. Thanks, Daniel. So coronavirus, what is going on with that? You've been doing some research, Daniel. I mean, look, it's a mile a minute, the news coming out, but can you give us a general shape of what's going on?
Yeah, well, it looks like the situation is really unfolding at the moment. Obviously, the coronavirus has exploded quite a bit in China, in a province called Hubei. And there's been it's actually tipped over 1,000 confirmed deaths so far,
Wow.
as far as that's been reported. So
And about 45,000 people infected now around the world?
Yeah, that's right. So the coronavirus essentially is like a respiratory virus. So you have like common cold symptoms like coughing, running nose, which can be like easy to sort of mix up with a common cold, I guess. And yeah, so that's obviously like broken out quite a bit, and it's called the coronavirus because the actual virus looks like it has these spikes. So the word corona I think in Latin means crown, so that's where they've gotten it from. But it's not in one form; it's actually in various forms. There's like multiple versions out there.
I was going to ask that because I've noticed that in the news when you're watching it, they sort of say novel coronavirus. They make it sound like there are other coronaviruses around. This is just one particular strain that's hitting right now. So how lethal is it? I mean, is it around 10% of people who have it who've died, or is it not quite at that level?
Well, I mean, it's more lethal than the SARS virus was, if you remember that. I mean, that was in like the 2002, 2003, early 2000s sort of time. It's more lethal than that. I guess because it's like going off the common cold symptom, it seems like there is no cure, but it is preventable.
But it also seems to be underdiagnosed. Like I was reading today that in Indonesia, for example, there are absolutely no confirmed cases of coronavirus. And that seems weird because there are just like thousands of Chinese tourists going to Indonesia, all the time, every year to Bali, and no reported cases. What is going on there? Is there actually, a pandemic or an epidemic going on in Indonesia that we don't even know about that is going to emerge later on?
Yeah, that's the scary thing, because I actually read something today that said that it can take 5 to 6 days for someone to show symptoms. So they can have already contracted it, and then they could be spreading it already, but they're not showing any symptoms. And that comes back to the numbers that we were sharing about the confirmed number of cases in China. Apparently, the latest news is that the Chinese government has officially changed the definition of a confirmed case to someone who is showing symptoms. So if you've got a confirmed case, or like what we'd call a confirmed case.
So if they test your blood or
and
whatever.
you're positive, but you're not showing any symptoms, then the Chinese government no longer considers that to be a confirmed case.
Right, so that's sort of an artificial way of keeping the numbers down.
Yeah, because we have to remember the political situation in China at the moment. They're obviously under a communist regime, so
I mean, like, why communist? What difference does it make whether the government is communist or not? People are sick. That's the basic fact.
Yeah, well, I guess we look at history and we see other situations where communist governments have covered things up. And I'm thinking of something specific like the Chernobyl disaster, where the government there, the Soviet government, tried to downplay how many people were affected by it. And in the end, we don't actually have an official number of how many people died as a result. And
we saw that with SARS too, didn't we, in China, where they were really slow to respond, really slow to release information. And even in this case, I mean, they were pretty reluctant at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, there are some things to the Chinese government's credit that they are doing quite effectively. Like they built a hospital within 10 days.
That was nuts. I saw that. I saw the the sort of stop motion sort of vision of that just going up these concrete blocks, just
Yeah.
That was amazing.
So incredible that they managed to do that, but at the same time, are we getting the real numbers here? And if we aren't, then are we potentially underestimating the impact of this? And should we maybe know the full facts in order to prepare for it better?
Yeah.
Really, that's my question.
Look, you might be interested in checking out an article that appeared in the Signs of the Times magazine recently, just back in November last year. It's entitled Pestilence, which is pretty cool. And it's sort of in some ways a little bit sort of, prophetic in the sense that we're looking at these issues, these insects that are coming like out of the equatorial zones because of global warming, or permafrost that is melting and possibly releasing new bacteria from there that humans haven't seen or encountered for thousands of years. There are antibiotic resistant bacteria in hospitals. There are all sorts of issues there, and that article explores those issues. You might like to check it out.
What is alarming is that other people, like there's a professor from the public health medicine in Hong Kong who actually estimated that 45 million people could potentially be affected, including, or in fact killed by the virus, including 60% of the world's population, if it's not managed, the spread. Because from what we've been seeing so far, it seems as though it's been contained somewhat in China. Obviously, countries are on caution as to how it's spreading, but if it's not managed correctly, then it could end up affecting a large portion of the planet. Like, and the question there is that fear-mongering? Is that, or is that a realistic scenario?
Look, I have a theory on this, Daniel. It's something, a sort of a pattern that has been emerging for me as I've been looking at this, because as they're looking for the source of this coronavirus, first of all, it was a seafood market, okay?
Yeah.
Poor hygiene there, but it turns out it wasn't just a seafood market. There was all sorts of meats, all sorts of foods being sold there.
Yeah.
And then that theory has sort of been discounted, and now they're looking at the scaly anteater, which is the pangolin, which apparently is like, it's a mammal, but it's got scales, so it's like something that a lot of people haven't even heard of. But this is used in like markets through Asia and Southeast Asia for medicine, like in Chinese medicine, but also as meat. And there's a theory that this has been the source. There are bats involved there as well, and that's, but they're always like, there's bats, there's this pangolin, but then you look at SARS. I mean, you mentioned SARS, this apparently came from a civet, which is like a cat-like sort of animal. And again, using it for meat and that sort of stuff. I mean, you look at Ebola, that came from a bat. You look at HIV/AIDS, that came from probably, most likely, hunters in Africa catching apes and chimpanzees and possibly being scratched by them or just eating the meat. So to me, it seems to be a real pattern that's emerging there that, when people eat these sort of meats, they're actually at risk. And when I consider, the ancient wisdom of the Hebrew scriptures, it says, there are certain foods that are good to eat and certain foods that aren't. And it even divides meats into clean and unclean. And all these, like, bats, civets, pangolins and all that sort of stuff, they are definitely all in the unclean category. So for me, I think, wow, how is it that, like, wisdom from 3,000 years ago, if people had followed it, we wouldn't be facing this issue that we're facing. I mean, it's not to blame those people. That's it's deforestation. It's there's a whole lot of reasons why people eat those foods. But the choices we make in the way we live and as societies, we could certainly avoid similar things again if we could forego some of those behaviours, some of those foods.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess the question is also, obviously we're faced with this pandemic of the virus that's spreading across the globe. In Australia, they're saying that we are somewhat safe because in China it's winter at the moment, and this virus is sort of incubates better in winter or colder conditions.
Okay, that's interesting, because I was reading today that Australia is actually one of the likely hotspots, just simply because we're close to China and we have a lot of travel between us and China. They say there are thousands of passengers right now that have flown out of Wuhan over, in that period, that are now in all sorts of places around the world. And Australia is one of the larger places in terms of the numbers of people. So,
well, as far as how it's transferred, obviously, we've got a lot of links with China, but I think as far as the climate goes, it potentially would not thrive here as much as it would over there, because it's summer over here and as well as in New Zealand, so it's a little bit warmer weather.
And they're saying it's not airborne yet, aren't they? Like, they're saying you don't bother wearing masks. It won't help.
Well, I mean,
but then who knows? Next day, oh, sorry, it is airborne. I mean, that's the pattern so far.
I think it's a little bit too much to, at this point, like, all of us go buy respirator masks and start walking around and not, like, avoiding contact with anyone. But there are some basic steps that we can take, aren't there? Like, for example, washing your hands. If you've got
Basic hygiene.
Yeah, flu-like symptoms, then maybe don't go like sputtering into people's faces, you know.
Yeah, stay home.
Stay home.
Stay away from work. Don't
you
send
know,
your kids into school.
Watch
or
Netflix at home. take a day off.
Yeah.
And yeah, see a doctor. I mean, if you've potentially been in contact with someone who's come from that area, and then you start having symptoms, that would be a big
red
flag for me.
Absolutely.
I think, so.
Wow. So look, what do you think about this? Some pretty heavy issues. Look, we're full of problems and ideas here, and very short on solutions. We'd love for you to join us on the Signs Trending Facebook group. You have to like the page first, and then join the group, and yeah, get chatting. We like to think it's a safe place where we can, sort of discuss things openly and without the trolls. We'd love to see you there.